Okay. Oh, that's here. No. Come on in. You made it just in time. Got a spot for you over there.
Max.
Yeah, I just got it. It's a tricky place to find, isn't it? And that turn into the parking lot even was like, where's the turn? Where? Oh, there it is. I was glad there wasn't traffic when I was making my left turn. Okay, well, Jennifer, if you want to go ahead and just tell us, since the group has last met in May, the city council and Jennifer approved some hiring of attorneys to assist the board. Jennifer?
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. Welcome, board members. I'm a city attorney, and under the city ordinance or the city ethics policy is written, one of the requirements is that the city engage outside legal counsel to ensure that there is complete independence from the city law department and the city staff, and as you go through these complaints. So the city went through a competitive hiring process, issued a group of customer proposals, and the law firm of Pike Fanning Honeyman was awarded the professional services agreement to handle the legal function, the outside legal counsel duties under this agreement. John Newman of Pike Fanning Honeyman is here, has been engaged with staff already in this process. We had 3 complaints, and we received a 4th complaint, and this happens sometimes in the area of law where even though there's a lot of law firms in Wichita, the Pike Fanning Honeyman law firm had a legal conflict with a piece of the complaint that was filed, the 4th complaint. And so when that happens, the city then goes and finds another law firm. And Dave Rapp of the law firm, the Eagle law firm, graciously agreed to step in and serve as your legal counsel on only that 4th complaint. So that is not an unusual occurrence, but you have 2 of the finest attorneys you could have helping you through this process. So that's all it is. I step back at this point. I just will help staff if there's anything, but they will be your attorneys going forward on these complaints. And to provide any other just counsel or education advice that comes up. One of the duties under the policy is that you provide opinions and guidance upon request. Sometimes the attorneys will be asked to provide guidance in that area. So their goal is not just to help through investigation, but broader. So with that, I'll turn it back to Kathy. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, just a little bit more, I guess, housekeeping. Has everyone filled out their confidentiality agreement and sent it back to the city clerk? Because we do have some blank forms in case anybody didn't get that done. Okay, bring those around. Thank you very much. Okay, some of you all know each other and some of you don't so much. So it'd be great, I think, if we go around the room and just remind ourselves who we all are a little bit. Would that be, actually, Karen is one of our new people. And Karen, I don't know that you even probably attended either of the previous meetings when you were.
No, I saw it.
Previous. Oh, that's right, that's right.
I retired from the city clerk for Wichita, being officially was there for 19 years. So some of the faces are familiar. And I am taking over council member Fry's appointee, Grant. I believe he will be okay with us.
Thank you for joining us, Karen, very much. Yeah. Lucretia Taylor's not here tonight. Clark?
Yeah, Clark Owens, I'm retired and tired. 10 years, but I was back here in cases today, so that's the reason I was sued that for this occasion. So in retirement, I go back and do some coaching.
Yes. Thank you.
I'm Gina Hine. I have a bachelor in education and a master's in nursing family therapy, and I've been in private practice over 10 years. I taught college, and written a few books, a little bit of everything. I'm District 6.
We are so glad you're a part of this, Gina. Thank you. Vicki.
I'm Vicki Cheney Little, and I am just an active citizen. I graduated the first class at the Civic Engagement Academy, and I've always volunteered in to serve the community.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you.
Hi, my name's Ed Watson. I'm a lawyer over at Poston. Seaton. I've been in the community for about 15 years, almost 16 years. I'm with District 1.
Thank you.
My name is Kelly Shodorf. I'm just looking at what district I am, and I'm a mayor's appointment, I guess, is
Yeah,
what it's
you're the mayor.
called.
Mhm. You get to claim
Um,
all the districts.
Yeah. I'm an attorney here in Wichita, and I have a law firm called SJ Law downtown.
Thank you.
And I'm John Newman, earlier.
Eminence.
God bless you, man. And I'm Dave Rapp, the backup lawyer.
We won't ask you to sing or anything, so it'll be all right. So you all, if you would, now shall we have some motions about these two sets of minutes? I understood from reading the minutes from May that the April minutes were not brought to the May meeting for a vote. So we put both on the agenda, and I think they're both printed in front of you tonight as well. And perhaps a board member could make a motion to approve both of those minutes, unless anyone has anything, if you were at that meeting, if you have any concerns or changes or.
I'll move to adopt both.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Vicky. And all those in favor, say
I
aye.
have a question.
Yes.
Since I wasn't a member at that time, I probably shouldn't say it.
That'd be fine. Yep. All those in favor, say aye.
Uh,
5-0 to 1. And abstaining is Karen. Okay, it's probably become obvious that I'm serving as a role of facilitating the meetings. I'm not officially your chair. You're probably aware that the policy says that 7 members shall be appointed, and then the ethics officer would be the chair. And how do you get the ethics officer? You all at your May meeting reviewed some folks' names, came up with 3, and then I think you all know those 3 were attempted to take forward, but then dropped out, right? 1 moved, 1 wanted pay, and 1 was, had conflict, maybe, conflict. So our role for the next few months is to get the group going, get hopefully the city council to make some adjustments in the policy that'll clear up some of what you all are wondering about, maybe your own conflicts, and clear up any conflicts going forward. We're going to talk through that here shortly tonight. And then we'll be able to advertise for an ethics officer. And Cynthia and I will then back away as soon as you get a new ethics officer on board, and we can hand things off to that person. Yes.
I heard there was 4 complaints out there. I'm only aware of 1.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, so we have not yet
it's about
sent.
self-preservation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's okay. You guys, questions and dialogue through the whole meeting are absolutely fine. In my naivete at the beginning, when we first made our proposal to help the city with this, there was 1. And I didn't realize, I don't even think they've been sent out to everybody, but you had responded to my email saying, I don't have a complaint. What are you talking about? So then the next couple people I called, I said, have you seen a complaint? That's when I learned that no, people hadn't seen the complaints. And then as we read through the policy and thought about it some more, we thought, probably best to not distribute the complaints to everybody until there's 2 steps taken. The first step is the attorneys need to review the complaints and see if on their face they meet the requirements, the basic requirements, and make sure they're legit complaints. And then second, we send those complaints per the policy, to all members of the city council, the city manager, and then giving the one person who's being complained about in each complaint 7 days to issue their response. So we thought, or to give us a response. So we thought, okay, probably best to give the complaints to the board members when we have that response. So that way you can read one person's allegation and that person's rebuttal, so to speak, all at the same time. And then of course, the attorneys would be doing the investigation, determining if there are people to interview, et cetera. Process-wise, then bringing information back to this group, which leads us to another housekeeping thing. Yes.
So I was reading what you sent us, and your note said that the attorneys was going to do the investigation, but the language is not clear,
Yes.
because it says the ethics board and
Yes.
so,
That's one of the things we're going to go over tonight. You might remember the email. The biggest part of our agenda tonight is coming up here in item 3, City Council Policy 39 edits to be recommended. So we're going to go through each one of those here in just a minute. One last housekeeping thing is we chose this location thinking that it's often available, and we set our Thursday night meeting. You know, this is Wednesday, yes, but coming in January, we're all set for Thursday night meetings, right? Finding so many other city buildings that already had bookings on Thursday nights. So we chose this one thinking, okay, if we had to have a special meeting, if we have this one Thursday a month, this should work. And we have the technology, and the technology is to be upgraded here in a couple months too. So that all was good. However, now that you found this wonderful place, stay tuned. We're not sure if we're going to have the next meetings here or not. And the reason is we realize a big part of your work will be an executive session, because as you review each of these cases, you're probably going to have some conversation about each one in executive session, just to protect everybody's privacy and to make sure that you all can ask and get answers to the questions that are on your mind without feeling like you're, exposing things in public that shouldn't be. So of course, your deliberation and your decision-making would be in public session, but what that requires is 2 rooms. And Dante's going to check in and see if come January, when you might have an executive session, if we have a case ready to go, but for sure February, if we can adjourn to executive session down the hall in the office area and leave the public in here. I know it doesn't look like a public meeting, but just yesterday, one member of the public told me they were coming to this meeting. And of course, being live on Facebook streamed, I have no doubt that there are media reporters, members of the public watching the meeting, even though I know that's hard to, it's easier when people are here because you think of it being public when they're right here. But when you go to executive session, we have to keep the meeting going online so people know when you come out of executive session and start talking again, they can look at their screen again. So just logistically, we may or may not be here in the January and going forward as we had hoped. But if not, we're going to try to find another room that has the technology and is easier to find. And so going forward, so there we go. So if it's okay, we can jump into the policy. And if you want to put up on screen, Maddie, the policy, so we can walk through. Anybody who has your back to the screen, and if you want to look at the screen, feel free. But I think we were able to distribute photocopies in front of you of the document that was emailed to you a week ago. And that is policy 39 with the markups. Okay, so I am literally going to walk through these one by one. And so feel free to talk as we go or ask questions, whatever. I know it's been a long time since some of us have looked at this. Thank you, Dante. So on page 1, this is the crux of what several people have realized. Oh, does everybody have it?
I worked from home today, so I didn't have my iPad. So I'm kind of trailing.
We have copies, but
Yeah, I could use a copy.
yeah, I'm just asking, does everybody have a copy? Did you distribute the copies around the table?
Yeah.
I think they're in front of everybody, but
I
please.
don't have one.
Corinthian has some more.
Thank
Oh,
you.
yeah, gotcha. Does Ed have one maybe? Okay, okay.
We can prepare.
I know some of you probably printed them before you came, but, okay. So, we didn't go into this thinking we wanted to make a lot of changes, but I read the minutes from the past meetings and talked to all of you all, and many of you had very good suggestions as to some of the questions that came up at previous meetings. And one of them, I guess, really the hardest thing is on the front page, and it is the definition of active member of a political party. So one question was, what's active member? And for example, if you're just an elected committee man or committee woman of a precinct, is that considered active? So my suggestion is that we say to the council, you need to address committee person specifically in this, because some people think that's a pretty minor level of activity in a political party, but that's, some people think, no, that's very clear. You're stating who you are, and which side you're for, and as polar as our politics are these days, that should be spelled out and prohibited as being a precinct committee member. So I thought, okay, well, it's that simple. They just need to decide if they want precinct committee people or not. So as a board, this can be something that you're either divided on, or you as a board say, this is how the majority of us want it, okay? Now, the second comment on this front page though, and I don't see on screen the comments. Go ahead and scroll to where we're talking about the edits, if you don't mind. I think, of course, do your Facebook people see the screen, or do they only see the room?
They should see the screen.
Okay, great. Well, that way they can follow along a little better. So the second comment in my mind, I don't know if you all discussed this or if this was brought up before as an issue, but to me, it's pretty big. Because the definition that was thought about when they drafted this policy, no criticism intended, but they were focused on political parties, but mayor and council in the city of Wichita or any city don't run as political parties. It's a nonpartisan election. So I feel like the way this definition reads, you could literally run the campaign of one of the council members or someone running for council and still be qualified, still not qualify as an active member, right? Because it's not a political party, you're running a nonpartisan campaign. So my comment on this page was, I feel like, and I would, defer to what you all want. This is not my document. It's just a starting place is all I'm giving you. I just felt like maybe we ought to point out to council that active member of political party is not the only thing, but maybe, campaigning for people on city council and mayor should be considered. But I throw that out there. I'm seeing several heads nod. Does anybody want to talk about that? And believe me, we can run through all these and then come back to any as you think about comments too.
I agree.
I agree with those comments.
So I haven't attempted to write that yet, but if we're all on the same page, I will write a section that gets at and bring that back to you in draft 2 that basically says that doesn't just define political party, but also campaigns for Wichita City Council and mayor. Does anybody have other thoughts about how to define active member of a political party? The thought was, and I think in the comments, is the idea of making contributions, attending events, posting yard signs. Do we want to further define active other than saying precinct committee member?
I can't do a lot of those anyways with my judgeship, but I feel like for other people who are able to do that, they should be able to make contributions and attend events and put yard signs in their yard without being restricted by this appointment on this committee, because that's a free speech issue. And so we would really be limiting somebody's constitutional right to free speech. So I think that's a bit extreme. And so in my opinion would be to not include those things as part of a active member definition.
So
How do you segregate then between for the where we land, how do you segregate the circumstances, someone active, someone, choose where they're active, someone vociferously engages themselves in a campaign for a city elected official, but and their engagement is, signs, significant contributions. If we're gonna say that's not good, then where do you draw the line? Well, she's gonna write a definition that says active involvement in, running the mayor's campaign would exclude you from being on this committee. Well, what activity, I guess my question is, what activity is exclusionary versus, this free speech and activity engaged?
And
that's what we're trying to figure out.
yeah, and I mean, the way I see it, it's political party. So in other words, you can go campaign for governor. You can go put a sign in your yard for president, because that's partisan, political party, that's active. You can do that, but we have to write a new section to say, not for city council election, mayor elections. So, and we wouldn't have to define it either. We just say active, active member of an election committee for a city council for Wichita.
And maybe I misunderstood Kelly.
Yeah, I think you're defining two things. We're defining what active member means, and then whether or not it's strictly political party or if it's also city council, which I totally agree, it should include all elections across the board, whether political party or not. But I'm saying for the definition of active, that's so restrictive because my husband can put a sign in our yard. That's allowed. But if I'm not allowed to, how do we distinguish whether he can or not? But even further, it is just such a restriction on somebody's free speech right that being appointed to this committee, that feels excessive. Because that's maybe not even being active in a party, because what if you vote split ballot? If you have one political party, another political party, you're just being an active voter. You're being an active citizen participating in the elections of this country. So I don't think that that's necessarily really the intention. I feel like it's somebody who is working for the party, being paid by the parties. I don't know, we're working on these
Engaging in
campaigns.
paid work
Paid
for
work
a party
maybe?
or a campaign.
I can see that point of view. However, I believe applying it to the city council, since that is what this group is addressing, you have to make some type of boundaries. I mean, it is about the ethical boundary. And you can't just include everything. You will have a conflict there.
I agree.
The way it's defined now is not only active member, but it says specifically of a political caucus, political auxiliary group, or political party committee. I think we've just defined committee of saying that's an elected precinct committee person. The other two, I don't really know how to define. They're not common terms, and I don't know what a political auxiliary group is or who that is, but. So one thought would be just rewrite this to say actively engaged in campaigning for people on city council or mayor in Wichita, not any other city. And just that way it doesn't talk about political parties. But now earlier I said party committee, committeemen and women, right? And I got a lot of nods like, yeah, they shouldn't be on. So what do you think?
So I was just gonna is active like last election, previous election, like.
Well,
Do you have
if
a
you're
comment?
currently, yeah, that's a good
That's a good
word.
question.
Currently a committee member, not that you used to do that, but that you're currently, and that's, right on the election commissioner's website. I mean, either people were elected in August or they've been appointed to those roles. So it doesn't matter if you've done it previous, as long as you're not currently, but I think that's a really good word to add, currently. And basically, okay, here's a thought. What if it's just any elected official or working for a party? So in other words, if you're a state representative, you wouldn't be on this committee because you're elected. If you're a county commissioner, you wouldn't be on this. If
Like-
you're a precinct committee person.
They consider, so I'm just a judge one day a week, they consider that to be a public
Okay,
office.
we're gonna fix judge on the next page.
Okay.
And since this is so hairy, don't you hate starting with the hairiest thing on the very first page? Why don't we just agree to come back to this page? Is that okay? Because I really think some of these other ones are a lot easier to solve than that one. On page 2, page 2 is simple. It is just a definition issue because,
Relative versus family.
yeah, they define
Here's the
relatives. Up front, they defined relatives and then they started using the word family. So that's just totally a technical cleanup. Page 3 is that same technical cleanup 2 more times. And then you get to the bottom of page 3 and, oh yeah, this is another technical cleanup. Mayor and city council members may attend events. Corinthian, do you mind? Our guest here probably might want a copy of that to follow through. Sorry, we're just thinking about you. So do you see that paragraph? Well, all I did was I felt like I wasn't sure how to read this list because of the comma situation. And so I added the numbers, and I think it's just clarifying. Does it make sense to everybody, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, page 4, Ethics Advisory Board section. Okay. So on number 3, the first real edit, I think, and you all say if you think otherwise, but it struck me that the solution on the judges and the serving as a pro tem or a judge in another community, that's like a very part-time thing for attorneys, and it's a one night a month or something sometimes. Number 3, if we just say may not hold elected, insert the word elected public office or be a candidate for any elected public office. That way it's clear these judge positions for other cities, obviously, when I say obvious, you wouldn't be a judge in the city of Wichita. That is for the city of Wichita, that is a full-time job. So that's a city employee situation, but every other judge would be not elected. So I think putting that elected word in there should take care of that. Does that make sense? Because I know 2 of you had questions a few months ago of, do I even qualify to be on this board because I fill in as a judge or serve once a month or once a week as a judge in a different community. So. Now, the first comment on this page gets at a little different thing. So it appears the only concern here may be the requirement that all appointments to the board be residents of the city. Generally speaking, advisory boards are residents of any city, and that's very common in most all cities. But I wondered if you all wanted to give some consideration to the notion of this ethics officer, because is it like the committee would live in the city, but when you're talking about the ethics officer, do they have to live in the city? That would just expand the pool of candidates, and sometimes, and feel free to weigh in with your thoughts, but sometimes when it comes to conflicts of interest and such, sometimes we hire an out-of-town attorney because the attorneys in town have too many dealings or too many conflicts. And so not that the ethics officer has to be an attorney, but they may be. And it takes a lot of attorneys out of the pool and a lot of qualified people out of the pool if you say they can't live in Newton or Eastboro or Mays, or it really takes your pool down a lot. So I don't know if any of you have thoughts about that.
I do, but I don't want to talk about it.
I think it's helpful that they're a resident, and there is the other option of academic besides attorney. It's not just attorneys.
Yes.
Whether it's, I respectfully disagree. I don't think they need to be, in fact, in my mind, it might help the feng shui of the situation. If the person is not from here, not impacted, doesn't know all the characters that didn't go to school with, you might get a more objective point of view. I don't necessarily care whether they're attorneys or not. Attorneys, all attorneys are not bad people, but at least not all of us. But if you get somebody from some place else, you might get, you might bring a different perspective. If you go down sort of the DEI lane, you talk about inclusion and diversity. Diversity of geographics and might help your circumstance. I mean, from the legal side, a lot of times you're better off with a mediator from Topeka or Kansas City that just not engaged, that can give you a point of view that you wouldn't otherwise have in a particular situation, because all of us know each other. Yeah.
I honestly think that is some of what has been experienced so far with some of the people who have been asked to consider the role. It's not a job, okay? It is a contract kind of position that you're gonna be busy if you have a lot of complaints filed, but, you know, you may not have very many hours in it if, you know, there aren't very many complaints filed. So it's more of a contractual thing. And I do know, I mean, I guess that idea got in my head because of some of the conversations I've had with people. And I thought, you know, this is hard to put on residents to say that you're gonna, you know, read the news every day about your community and about your elected officials, and then you're the one that's gonna be in that role of, so it's just a thought. And it's obviously the council's decision. I think everything we're talking about here is just because I'm sure the council will want to know how you all weigh in on all this. And we want to give them the best recommendation possible. So
When are we
Any other-
giving a recommendation?
when, it all depends on tonight and how smooth this goes, or I guess how much you're ready to say, yes, we're ready. My belief is after we leave here, I'll do some more edits based on your input tonight, send you out a new one. And that version also we would post online so other people could look at it too. And whether we could get to a city council meeting in late January or maybe early February, something like that would be the soonest. But if there's more research we need to do or thoughts, but I would hope that we could, you know, finalize this, our recommendations at the January 12th, our meeting on January 12th.
Kathy, just real quick, do we have any examples from peer cities that have made as far as an ethics officer and how they handle whether or not it should be,
Mm,
you know, as resident or non-resident? I kind of agree with that. I think they're probably gonna have a lot better time finding a qualified person that doesn't already have.
There's pros and cons to everything, but it would be, there's a lot of people that live in surrounding cities that commute there for work and
Oh, yeah.
other things and have an understanding of the community, so. I mean, we can be open, we're not gonna be biased to anybody that might want the position.
yeah, well, and that's the thing. I'm not saying you have to go out. I'm just saying if it's not another restriction, you're just more likely to get a bigger pool of people to
And
choose
I'm
from.
thinking more along like Andover, Derby, Mays, places like that versus Topeka. And that's,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the metro area, so I mean, you could probably get someone from this area. Yeah. Okay, I think I'll keep the comment in there about resident then and let the council sort that out. It sounds like we're probably not unanimous, but probably leaning toward not making it be one more thing to
Can
restrict.
we add a suggestion that we suggest the metro area? I know that's hard to define, but
No, that's cool. That's a great idea. We can do that. Okay, then in number 4. Look, Chris is here. Hello. Do come in. We have a spot for you over here. So number 4 on this page is scratching out the word or nonpartisan. And this again would just be enlarging the pool of candidates for the board and for the ethics officer. So this would allow people who are actively involved in the community, or you could say in politics, but not restricting someone who's in League of Women Voters or any kind of a nonpartisan group. The examples I use there might be somebody working on a school bond issue, or that's nonpartisan, right? Somebody working on, we need a new pool in our city, or we want a sales tax for a new museum or a zoo or whatever. Because nonpartisan means any activity really. So it may not be the only way to broaden this, but I thought it seemed like the obvious way. Just scratch or nonpartisan. Any thoughts on that one? And then number 8, I guess that is, we did add language for the residency in number 8, preferably, but not necessarily live in the city limits. So we could add something about metro area as well there in that line.
Metro area instead of city limits?
Preferably, but preferably live in the metro area, but not necessarily live in the city limits. That's probably where I'd put it.
Yeah.
Preferably,
Where's Hutchinson?
I'd call Hutchinson in the metro area. I don't know that Hutchisonians would call it that, but
Could you put a mileage restriction?
yeah.
On here, we want to do that.
Would, is metro area sound right, or would you say South Central Kansas? Because Newtonians would probably argue they may be in the metro area too.
Yeah, I don't think they would argue that they are.
Yeah, there's a lot of
They
independent
don't want to be the
cities.
metro.
They
area.
don't like the term metro area, do they? What about South Central Kansas? This region of the state, something like that?
I mean, I just don't know why. you
Wichita
would wanna
area?
restrict- if you're looking for the private school, I don't know why you want to restrict it. I don't know what we get from that. What does the city of Wichita or this committee gain by restricting where the most qualified ethics officer is from?
Mm-hmm.
Particularly in this world of Zoom, Teams.
Yeah, true. And if it's a preference though, if we're opening it up from not being in the city limits, but we're stating a preference for how about the region, the Wichita region? Does that work?
Sedgwick County.
That doesn't do it. Because Andover's not Sedgwick County, Newton's not Sedgwick County, so that really wouldn't be big enough.
Wichita region under 5 terms, that's helpful.
Right. I mean, to me, metro area, Wichita region, South Central Kansas, kind of all the same thing, but for most people, it's just gonna be how many counties out do you go, Okay, anything else on this page that needs discussed? At the bottom, selection of ethics officer, this edit, insertion, who shall be engaged and compensated as an independent contractor. That was, the idea would be to make it very clear that the intent is to pay for services rendered, but not be an employee per se. Now, this last one, it's kind of on page 5. I had this weird spacing thing going on here, but the only thing on page 5 is, to me, reading it, I just did not feel like it ever actually said that the ethics officer has to meet all the requirements of the Ethics Advisory Board previously listed. I think that's the way it was interpreted, a few months ago. So I really think I was just trying to add the words, meet the above qualifications as a member of the Ethics Advisory Board, just to make kind of clarifying, not substantive change, but just clarifying. Page 6. Can't remember why I had that highlighted. Oh, well, maybe I inserted that. Yeah, it looks like using the prescribed form is highlighted just because I think it implied there was going to be a form. There was a form. The form is being used, but we wanted to be clear that we want you to use the form. Okay. And, that you can't just send something else. Instead of the form, I'm sending you this. Well, use the form, Let's see next, the ethics officer in consultation with outside legal counsel. Okay, here's the tricky stuff. This is why, this paragraph here is why we needed to go to city council yesterday. Because in reading in me starting to want to jump in and let's work on this, and then having met with John, we sat down and read this detailed and we realized, hold it. Even though, the city wanted to engage WSU to help with this, we really didn't have the legal authority. And then once the city engaged John, we had half because it says that the ethics officer and outside counsel would do some of these things together. So you have to have both positions filled in order to do anything. And that's why the complaints that have been filed are sitting there, because we realized, because I thought, I'll send them out to the person being complained about, give them their 7 days and get the rebuttal and get this process going. And then it's like, no, I can't do that because I'm not the ethics officer. And because even if I were, I'm not the ethics officer, but then we need to have the city council do what they did yesterday. They made an exception to this policy to simply allow the legal counsel who have been engaged to proceed with the 2 steps we talked about. First, examine, read the complaint and see, does it meet the basic qualifications on its face? And then go ahead and send it out to the person being complained about and get their response. And then the investigation part comes next. So what we're suggesting here would be more permanent changes to the policy, whereas the council just gave us a temporary exception yesterday so we could start working. What we're talking about is how would we suggest rewriting this to where it's a little more helpful going forward? And what I mean is, what if it's hard to hire an ethics officer? Still, what if John quits? And then it takes another month to find another attorney. So there's always going to be a time when one of those two people may not be available. So what I tried to write in here is the ethics officer, insert the words in consultation with outside legal counsel to the board. So in other words, instead of saying two people have to do something, it's saying the ethics officer is supposed to do it. They'll consult with the attorney, but it's not like two people have to agree per se. Does that make sense? You're making a little more clear who's responsible.
I don't want to draft on the fly, but I don't know if in consultation with resolves your dilemma.
Yeah.
We can talk about that. I mean, because I can see arguing, that there's a requirement that the ethics officer consult with legal counsel. And if you're trying to avoid that, I mean, I understand what you're saying. This has to be written a little differently.
Okay.
I agree.
John, you keep looking at me like.
No, I agree with you. That's what it, I mean,
When you argue that, if you're on the other side of the.
well, that's what it says is that he would,
Jurisdictional requirements because he's so.
well, when I read it, I assumed that's what was intended.
Yeah.
He decides, but he consults with me,
Yeah.
which, consultation is,
I
you
work
agree?
May.
Yes.
I work, May.
It doesn't make it optional, but
Yeah, yeah.
consults. Is it, were you wanting it to be optional that he even speaks to me or she?
Because what if you're not
No.
here? That's the problem, right?
Or
So
available.
if you have to consult with legal consultation, then we have no movement forward if you,
Well, it just
Quit or
depends on if
die or
you want
something.
a two-tiered screening process or have no, if you don't care if I have my eyes on it,
right.
I don't
then
think you should.
Well,
I mean, I don't wanna do it.
That's, do we want a system in which the legal counsel has to be involved? Yeah, yes or no? If the answer to that is we don't require that the ethics officer can stand alone, then I would split this sentence. I would say ethics officer, shall review the complaint, and then I would have another sentence that said, the ethics officer may consult with outside legal counsel.
if you even need to say that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm with you, because we have to just decide how we want it, right? Because you're right, the way it's written doesn't do what I thought it did.
Yeah.
Because in the highlighted yellow part, they determined to be incomplete, so you pretty much are saying there that the two of them are making the decision, right?
Yeah, you just have to decide, we have to decide which way to go, and I don't, this is not, I don't have a dog in that, I don't.
John,
know
what
what's
do you
best.
think? Should it be the ethics officer deciding it and only getting advice from counsel,
Sure.
or is it the two of them together? Do you have any thoughts?
Really, there's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever you guys feel comfortable with. I mean, we haven't even met the ethics officer, so it's hard to say, but I guess I originally envisioned my role when I first learned about this, before I'd even read about this, that I would be consulting and providing advice when needed. So the ethics officer making those decisions and then consulting me when needed fits within what I originally envisioned my role would be. But I'm happy to have a more active and
Can we say with the availability of consulting?
I think you pick one or the other. Either the ethics officer has the authority to do it, and then if they have questions and want my opinion, I provide it, or they're required to ask me about it before they decide. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but if you're comfortable with the ethics officer doing it, then I'm just providing advice when needed.
I think if they're a good ethics officer, they're going to consult legal counsel.
Sure. I'm happy to do it. Don't think I'm trying to get out.
Dismissed.
But if you want an escape valve where you want things to be able to move forward in the absence of, I guess me, I'm pretty available, but you wouldn't have the requirement that he consult with.
So I guess the question is, do we want a requirement that they consult or not? And I don't have a position.
Well, changing at the least from what the council already did, I'm gonna say we take out, what if we take out the word in consultation with? And just let me try this out for size here out loud. The ethics officer shall review the complaint, comma, consult with outside legal counsel to the board, comma, and take no further action on any complaint. So that way they have to consult with the council.
Outside of the council.
Because the way that the city council has this written is the ethics officer and outside legal counsel shall review. So to me, that's making the least amount of change, right? It's saying the ethics officer has to talk to the attorney. Doesn't say they have to do what he says, or, I mean, it's not two people making a decision, but it's,
Exactly.
they just have to consult with them.
That works until you don't have an outside legal counsel, which was the first problem we raised.
Yeah.
That was good.
Doesn't fix anything, yeah.
That's why I wanted with the two separate, that's why, because you made that point, that's why I went with two separate sentences with the May.
Okay, so you're thinking,
I'm just trying to resolve the problem.
no, I'm hearing you. I think, I forgot about that. You're saying it would be better to make it permissive with may instead of shall.
And then it's a separate sentence, and that way, you know,
That's a very good point.
that way, if
ethics
John
officer.
doesn't exist.
Shall be
John, you just said that.
may.
But John knows I love him, because he's his eminence, he was president.
Not the only one.
We'll do may. And then, because that does give some flexibility in case there are absences. And then the new part in blue, right under the yellow part, I don't know, you guys probably have a black and white, but it says in the absence of an ethics officer, a member of the Ethics Advisory Board shall serve in the place of the ethics officer for purposes of determining if a complaint is frivolous or groundless on its face. Selection of a member to serve this purpose shall occur on a rotating basis, beginning with District 1 appointee. That was purely just trying to think, okay, what if you don't have an ethics officer? How can you keep the process moving? And the only decision is reading that, talking to the attorney saying, is there any reason why we don't carry this forward? Do they meet the basic requirements of, is this a complaint that should be investigated? It would not be the same person every time, but it would just start in numeric order. Every time you have a complaint, okay, number 3, it's your turn to fill in, that type of thing.
I don't have a number, so if we could avoid numerical.
You'd probably be last, right?
Yeah.
Well, if we started with 1.
Yeah, which is fine,
Yeah.
but if we could just avoid numerical order.
So then would there be directions to that? Like, how do you read that person in and know what that process would be? You know, there'd be things you need to know when you're going to step in.
Essentially, the city clerk's office would get a new complaint, and then they say, well, we don't have an ethics officer. Read this. Oh, okay. Let's go to
One
District
term,
1.
2 be the
Exactly.
last one.
Pull them in with the attorney, say, here's the complaint. And we probably just sit there in a little meeting and say, read the complaint. Does it meet one of the requirements, you know, in this policy? There's this A through P, all the things that are, you know, something that someone could file a complaint about.
That's where John comes in.
And because the mayor's appointee doesn't have a number, you might put that in the mayor's appointee also.
In the place or whatever numbers are.
Right.
You mean the sentence that says selection of a member to serve this purpose shall occur on a rotating basis, beginning with the District 1 appointee and ending with the mayor's appointee? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, because I guess it doesn't state whether we're going District 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, mayor. It just kind of says starting with 1.
Yeah.
So do we-
At least just some flexibility if 2's gone or
That's
something.
true.
I think we probably figured it out.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's super, I mean, someone is available.
The 2 could be in Aruba.
Yeah.
So it could be.
Yeah.
Okay, now, next sentence is not changed in all other cases. Ethics officer shall deliver copy of the complaint to the folks. Then the next sentence, the person against whom the complaint is made shall have 7 days from receipt of the complaint in which to file a written response to the complaint with the ethics officer. I scratched and outside counsel. I just thought, you know, one person's gonna email them the complaint, one person's gonna get it back. They'll share it with all the right people, but does that make sense, or do we care?
It does, and I'm happy to play whatever role you wish for me, as long as it's ethical and there's no conflicts, but you'll save money on paying for attorney's fees if you don't send me every single piece of paper that I
No,
don't.
thank you. That was one of the eyes I read this whole thing with, trying to figure out what are things that city staff can do. And Dante and Maddie know that, and the clerk knows that I've been trying to be like, okay, as Corinthian and I are trying to walk through a lot of the process and procedures that we'll work on next, at the next meeting, hopefully. Procedures being who does what, because a lot of things are written in general terms here. So we said, okay, clerk, you get this and you do this and you do this and you do this part, but then then Maddie's gonna support the board, but the clerk does all these things up front with the board members and then also with the complaints. The more they can keep detail work, because a lot of things in here says the ethics officer is doing all those things. Well, the hourly rates of an ethic officer aren't set yet, but I think they're gonna be more than the city clerk. And they're not gonna be as much as the outside counsel. So I went through this with the mind of saving the city money to try to make it very clear who's supposed to do what.
So I'd strike with the ethics officer and figure out, you know, what clerk gets the filing. It's kind of like, it's been so long since I've read the federal rules, but does it say file with the clerk? It does say file with the clerk. So, file with the-
So that's why we took outside counsel off of that sentence. And then the next sentence says the complaint and written response will be delivered to the EAB for investigation. And that's the part that Ed brought up a while ago. That is such a generic, you know, it's like, how is a 7-member body that can operate in public, has to operate in a public meeting? How is a board going to conduct an investigation?
See, and I would strike that whole sentence if we're not going to do it. And then, because the next sentence tells you who's going to perform the investigation. If we're not going to perform the investigation, I think that sentence has to go.
Okay. So just to read it into it just say it out loud here, the next added sentence would be the ethics officer and or outside counsel shall perform an investigation and when completed, present their findings and legal advice to the EAB in executive session, after which the EAB shall make decisions and vote in public meeting. So if you saw some of these complaints, you'd read it and you go, huh, I bet you we need to interview that city staff member and that city staff member and that elected official and that person. You might have 3 or 4 or more people to interview. So the only way for the board to do that is have them all coming into executive sessions. Before you know it, you all are going to wish you were getting paid how many hours you're putting into it, right? But who writes the questions? Who's going to be the questioners? You know, all that kind of thing. So yes, this is what I'm suggesting. I think you have one person do the investigation, or in this case, the and or being made very explicit that it's the ethics officer and the attorney. But if one is vacant, then you have the and or flexibility to continue on with the investigation. Those people would not be making any decisions about the complaints, only interviewing people, reading the information, putting together a report that they bring to you. Okay, here's what was alleged. Here's what she said, you know, in response. Here's who I talked to, and here's what I read, and here's the findings of fact, essentially. And then the board would absorb that, figure out, well, did you ask this? John, did you ask this? Dave, what about this? You might ask them those questions in executive session to say, well, did you consider this? And did you consider that? And then they might need to go do more work possibly before the board's ready to make a decision.
I agree, but I just think you need to do a strike the sentence prior to that.
Which sentence is that?
How about,
No, I'm sorry, maybe I would.
do you want it delivered to the board and then strike for investigation, or do you want to even?
Yeah, or strike for investigation, I'm sorry,
That's a
for
good idea.
investigation,
I'm with you.
not the whole sentence.
So okay, The complaint and written response is delivered to the whole board. And then the ethics officer and or outside counsel would do the investigation. Obviously, you will have then the information. And if you say, well, okay, ethics officer, I think you should do this or do that. I mean, you could have input into the investigation early on, right? Because you'll have a copy of it all. So you'll know, this is what I want to know. I want to ask this question. Okay, well, we'll move on then. And the next paragraph is, at the conclusion of the investigation, the EAB's written report shall be provided to the city council. So the clarification on this was, and the questions asked by Janet Johnson that she gave us, her questions and such from last time, was what does this mean, present? Does this mean it's like a press conference? Does this mean it's a presentation in a city council meeting? What does that mean? So that's why we wanted to clarify that it's a written report provided to the council. So it does not have to be presented at a podium, but it needs to be a written report that is, a public document.
So is it not something that you would need to share during a council meeting?
I think, it's up to the mayor, council manager to set their agenda. Yeah, I think it's certainly fair to think that some of this could be very detailed, or it could be, the written report is probably the best way for most people to absorb that type of information. But if they want to talk about it in public meeting, they certainly could at a later time. After we give them the report, and then they can do with it whatever they want. You know what I mean? If they want a question or whatever, they could do that. Okay, that was the hardest part, you guys. We're making progress. I think the only other change on here, and we are coming on to an hour now, so I'm aware of that, is the very last page, very last statement of the policy. And that's just simply, changing and saying that it is a policy, it's not an ordinance. Now, if the council makes it an ordinance at a future time, then obviously that change, but I've changed it in this just as a technical cleanup. Other thoughts? Anybody want to come back to page 1 and say anything else about the political part? Thank you. It's tempting to want to define active member. It's just hard, right? So I think we'd be making progress if we did say if we kept active member political party, as they've said, but just inserting the city council, the city election, or just put the city election and take out the political party piece due to the freedom of speech issue that Kelly raised.
Well,
Does that
I
make
agree
sense?
with adding all of that in. It's your comment here that says you may want to include in the definition of active, making contributions, attending events, posting yard signs. I don't think those are active political party or active campaign things. I think those are more freedom of speech issues.
Yeah, I think I'll take all that out of the comment, and I'll be honest, I was going by what people were saying. Well, what does active member mean? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's
And I'm like,
confusing
well,
thing.
I mean, if you want to define it, here's some of the things you need to pick. I think you're right. A lot of those are free speech. And so,
And I don't want to get in trouble with my husband's putting yard signs in our yard.
yeah, yard signs. So I think if we focus on active in city elections, and then did you want to put paid work for a party or a campaign, a political party or a campaign? Any campaign, not just city council. Yeah. And precinct committee, men and women, right? Clearly Republican, Democrats. So we would say precinct committee people, elected officials. That was the thing we talked about a while ago. Elected officials including precinct committee members and actively working paid work for political party or campaign. Any campaign.
Any political campaign.
Well, do we mean campaign for city council or mayor, city of Wichita?
Yeah, for political office, but not like a bond issue campaign or abortion rights campaign.
What about the governor's campaign?
That's,
We care about that.
I would think so.
Okay.
It's political.
I'm gonna be drafting something and sending it all out
I
for
think
you all to
that's
look at,
wise.
because it's not coming to me right now, but, okay. And currently precinct committee chair. Okay, so I'm gonna work on this and email you all a new version, and then we'll post that one online as well for other people. So to get back to the agenda now, maybe we can zoom through a couple things here and wrap up soon. I mentioned procedures. We've started drafting procedures. We have some more work to do. We felt the need to deal with this policy piece first, so we probably will bring procedures to you later. And then we've pretty much covered the complaints and investigations issue now. The next meeting you have on your calendars on January 12th, we mentioned earlier, it's here now, but be on the lookout. We may change the location. It is at 6 p.m. They are monthly Thursday, 6 p.m. meetings starting in January. We'll readdress the policy. I mean, and maybe we can do some email stuff and have your work done. But here's my question for you. Do you see the process going is, here's our recommendation, city council, here you go. Now you take public input, or do you want to take public input at this meeting? That would be the January 12th meeting, and we would invite people to come in and say what they think about these edits and changes. And you could, I don't think you're obligated to do that. You were asked to represent the public and work on this board. My guess is when this shows up on city council agenda, the public will speak to their council members because they're the ones voting on it. You're just making a recommendation to them. But either way, we'll put the next version out on the website. So if people know you or they see your names, online, they could email you or something and say, well, here's what I think. I want you to be prepared for that. Others will just email their council members, because they know that's who's, really voting on it. But
I think you were getting more input and visibility of the city council.
Yeah.
There'd be more opportunity.
And I want to be respectful of your all's time. We're making these meetings as open and public as we can, but if we start saying we want people to come in and testify and tell us all the reasons to redo a policy that you didn't even write, you're just trying to make it workable at this point. We're going to have more meetings and longer meetings. So I think we've got plenty on our plate. Okay, so quorum is 4. I say that because I never want to exclude anybody, and I'm glad you could all make it tonight. But just going forward, if we have 4, we're having a meeting. And so I know there's going to be times when people are going to have conflicts. And we did the best we could to find that Thursday night that everybody could work out for starting in January, and it's on your calendars, but things will come up and we'll just have to press on. We thought we'd have this online attendance thing, but so much of our meetings will be going back and forth between executive sessions. So if you're online, you can't be in the executive session. I hope that's clear as to why. Executive sessions have to be confidential. And if you're on Zoom, all you gotta do is turn on your recorder and record the whole thing. And then all of a sudden, that's really hard. So hopefully everybody can make it to the meetings we'll have, but we know things will come up.
Is there a proxy of possibility?
I don't think there's a proxy vote at all, no. Nope. As we said earlier, though, we'll do the best we can to get you all information to read in advance of the meetings. So you're not sitting here looking at brand new stuff in the meetings, if at all possible. Some of that's going to be hard with cases because you'll talk about that in executive session.
So the executive session will be basically for us to, I don't know if you have consensus for the recommendation that we take to the council. And the council's going to be the actual body that
Thank you for bringing that up, though. So there's two roles of this group, and a lot of what we're doing in public is policy, it's procedure, it's that kind of thing. But when it actually comes to the cases, you'll go to executive session to hear what your investigator has said. Okay, here's what was alleged, here's what I learned, here's the facts, here's my recommendations to you, or how I see your options, and then you all talk amongst yourselves and such and think, okay, where are we at? But it's to get the details and the question and answer with your attorneys. It's kind of an attorney-client, this is your attorneys and they're his clients, right? So, so then you don't come to a decision in executive session, you're hearing and you're absorbing information. And then you come back into the main public setting and you're able to have, digested some things and then be able to say, okay, I make a motion that we do this, and somebody else, I'm not sure I agree with that, or, we can debate and vote, but there might be things you want to ask your attorney that you don't want to ask that in public, that's what you do in executive session. Clarify your boundaries, clarify the legalities. John, Dave, anything to add to that? Jennifer? It's about the size of it, but although you're an advisory board, you do make the decisions on the cases. Now, your decision is advisory. Okay, you said, yeah, we don't think this wasn't good. Oh, this is okay, whichever that call is. Then beyond that, as you know, the policy might say there might be a fine, there might be training or education. If you don't pay the fine within a certain number of days, then maybe there's public censure. Someone still could say, well, there's no teeth to this. Well, if there's, if it becomes well known that, you censured me or I have to pay a fine because I did something wrong or whatever, that is, enough for most of us. Most of it, oh, I didn't realize I did something wrong. Sorry, let me pay the fine, let me make this right. But if someone thinks that this board is going to, force a council member to resign or something like that, that's, it doesn't go that far. If the public wants to say, well, the ethics board censured you, now I want to take that further. I want to, do a recall petition, or I want to run against you or whatever. That's their business. That makes sense? Okay. Questions, discussion, anything else? The only things I thought of for the bottom line here is there is online a COMA-CORA, that's Kansas Open Meetings Act, Open Records Act. There's PowerPoint that some of you reviewed in your earlier meetings and others of you were appointed later. That link to that PowerPoint slide is right there on the city's website. And so if you have not reviewed that in a while or want to refresh, feel free to do that on your own. The confidentiality piece, we did ask you all to sign that. And that's the other part I just want to distinguish. Anything we talk about in public meeting here is public. It's cool. It's policy. If you've got policy ideas, you want to go back to your council member who appointed you and say, well, here's what I was thinking on this policy thing or whatever. That's cool. The confidentiality piece is about the cases or the what we call them, complaints. That's about those details. Those are not things you're going to want to go back to, your person who appointed you to this board and say, well, he said this, but then I said that. And then I really don't think, you know what, we don't need to do that. So there will be a written report with the findings of the board, but not every individual's opinions and such. Having said that, you're on a public board. Someone from the news media or claiming to be with a media outlet could call you or email you and want you to weigh in on things and want you and say, well, you said this in the meeting and what'd you mean? Or how come you guys decided this? All I want to say is, we're back to free speech. You can respond to a media question or you cannot. You don't have to feel like that, hey, I'm a member, I should state my piece. A lot of boards I've been associated with just designate, okay, here's the chair of the board, you talk to the media. Because if you don't do that, then media calls each and every one of you and, let's see who's gonna say just the opposite of what the other guy told me or whatever. But But I just don't, I just want you to know, I'm not telling you not to talk to the media. I'm telling you, you don't have to, just because you're appointed to this. You could easily say, I'm not the spokesperson for the board. I'd rather not talk to you. If you choose to talk to them, of course, they'll keep calling you. But once we get through our first case, I think some of this will gel up. I don't claim to have all the answers right now, but I think that we'll get our process going and keep everything as transparent as possible, but in an official way, not in an opinion, or I don't quite remember, or, so, does that make sense? I know it's hard sometimes, especially when you're not used to media people calling. You just feel like, oh, well, I should answer this question. Well, you don't have to. Anything else for tonight? This is gonna be fun, right? It already is fun. I applaud you all for stepping forward to do this. It is interesting work, but also difficult work, but it is noble, and I am proud to be a part of it all with you all. Thank you very much. Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yes. And Kelly, did you
Yeah.
have one of these?
Sure do.
Maddie, you would love to give you these.
Thank you. Same time, almost died, worst thing I've ever been through.
Did you get that one?
Well, thank you. I'm feeling pretty good. He's good. Really good. Oh, was he? Judge's Day? He's so funny.